Today's featured reader is Steve Slemenda. Steve, of course I put my glasses away just so I needed to read again. It's ridiculous.
I remember when you didn't need it.
Me too. Ugh. Steve Slemenda attributes his initial love of words to having been raised in a home where his mother played the American Songbook on their 50s hi-fi stereo, and his older sister introduced him to early rock and roll emanating from her transistor radio. The sea change in rock lyrics in his teen years in the late 60s further deepened his sense of beauty and power of language, as did listening to Vince Scully's poetic play-by-play of Dodger baseball games. At the time, he discovered early and mid-20th century American poetry. At 15, the table had been set for a lifelong relationship with reading and writing. He spent most of the next decade as a reporter and web press operator for the Silverton Appeal Tribune. In 2000, he co-founded the Silverton Poetry Association, and for 20 years was the chief organizer of the annual Silverton Poetry Festival. He's a founding member of the Mid-Valley Poetry Society. In the fall of 2018, MVPS launched a bi-weekly radio program, Poetry on the Air, at KMUZ in Salem. Steve hosted the program for over 5 years. In 2023, he had the honor of 2 first-place awards at the OPA Fall Poetry Contest, including the New Poets category. So here is Steve Slemenda.
Hello, hi, thank you. New poet at 72. Just one little correction to Mark's generous introduction, and that is, for 20 years I was co-organizer of the Silverton Poetry Festival with my colleague Kelly Morehouse. Couldn't have done it without her. Well, I don't do this very often. Oh, first of all, I just want to thank Mark because he's been doing this now since 2016. For 8 years, he's been doing this once a week. It's amazing, and it's something that we never want to take for granted. How many communities have a poetry reading with usually good poets every week, right? It's amazing, and it's not an easy thing, and he makes it look easy. It's just not, so... Thank you, Mark, so much for that. And thank you for the invitation today. So to get started, I woke up pretty early this morning thinking about tonight, and I remembered that in 2016, a friend of mine said to me, be humble but not modest with your poetry. Be humble but not modest. And so that moved me to do a little bit of writing this morning, and I wanted to just begin my reading tonight with what I wrote this morning. To be humble is to remember, after all, that it is just poetry. It's not really a big deal. It's kind of like the way life is. It's any life. It's here and gone. It's a small part of something big and vast and mysterious. I have to remind myself not to make too much of it or have too much ego investment in it. It's a gift for sharing, that's all. And let it be what it is, share it in love and awareness as best I can, and let it go. Let it find its own place in the world, kind of like when you have kids and let them go. Your job is to make the offering. So that's the humble part. To be not modest is to remember that it is, after all, just poetry. And yes, it's not for me to measure its worth beyond that, but it is a reflection for each of us. It's a reflection and an expression of something sacred. All of our poetry is, because it's the song of ourselves. It's the echo of our lives, an offering of what it is to be human and move through this strange and magnificent experience that we know and call life. We all have our songs, and songs are for singing. Like each bird song, each poem is in its own way wondrous, unique, and fleeting. It's a thing shared that comes and goes. A moment of beauty, we hope, or at least an attempt at such. In humility, but not modesty. Sometimes I think of a poem as the sweepings of a soul to raise a little dust to try to catch the light that we all need to make our way through this strange journey of life. So let's see how much dust I can kick up today. I'll start with just a couple short poems, meditations on dawn, that actually were written in the spring. Dawning. First light slowly over the lake, a single bird song, then another, and more, into a chorus from far and near, enclosing me in a spring green surround sound overture call and response. Stranger, stranger, wake, wake, here, 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 now, now. Life so in love with itself, it sings the dawn into being. This is the way. A slow rolling mist over the lake covers reflections of dawn, all but the lit tips of trees still rippling upside down as the complicit sun says yes to it all. And I sit here thinking I want to escape from illusions, from the mist of metaphors. But truth needs no revelation. It's all in the all of it. Beauty as deep in the everyday commonplace as in the marvelous. A teaspoon in a moonlit sink. The rainbow a proxy for the faded blue and gray of day. Every illusion a placeholder for its deeper truth. Like metaphor upon metaphor, mist over reflection, the face of God in every exquisite face passing by. This is the longest one. Searching. Start a search in Google Earth and it begins with an image of the planet. You start as an outer space, as if a floating soul waiting for its body, its place in time. Google Earth to say 1957. Google Time Machine back to 5 years old, to images as memory manifest. Spinning Earth opens up in descent, down, 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 closer and closer to an opening and focusing. Aerial pinpoint that with some touch of wizardry manifests 1813 Hobart Boulevard, Los Angeles, California. And there it is, putting me back into that 5-year-old body, 3-year-old body, 2, 1, 6. And suddenly space becomes time, time becomes space. Street view, 360. To the square block shape of a fourplex, the front room over the street shared with my 2 sisters, still alive. Windows curtained, so all I can see is from within. I don't see him there, but I feel him. I see out from him, his 5-year-old eyes, and I imagine myself into him through those containing walls. Memory becomes a feeling in the chest, the throat, scan of images, names, moments. Old Mr. Hoffman downstairs giving me rye crisp, teaching me to do a headstand, teaching me to balance the world upside down on my 5-year-old head. Inside somewhere, the radio or hi-fi, I hear Elvis. Oh, well, bless my soul, what's wrong with me? I'm itching like a man on a fuzzy tree. My friends say I'm acting wild as a bug. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. And I see the little box record player on which Brian and I would place the 45 single Tammy, then plunk down on the floor in front of the player my 1-year-old sister Kathy, cherub baby with her platinum blonde Buster Brown hair, and we put the needle at the start of Tammy, the plaintive opening strains leading into a wistful lyric, I hear the cottonwoods whispering above, Tammy, Tammy, Tammy's in love. And we'd watch her face puff up, the tears start rolling down her chubby cheeks, and we'd laugh. It worked every time. My sister's still alive then. And my father in his easy chair, the one in which I once found a Playboy under the seat cushion, watching Thursday night boxing in a square of black and white brought to you by Gillette. My father's trousers hanging in the bathroom by the bathtub those days when he was home. The huge pockets into which a small hand would sometimes find a fat quarter or nickel or a mercury head dime. Trace the linear layout of that space from our front bedroom to a living room to a dining room that at night became my parents' sleeping room with a bed pulled down from behind a wall. through the narrow passage in the kitchen, behind a counter and stove, to an alcove where the back door leads to a second-floor deck and stairs down to the large plot of yard, my own daytime world. The sandbox under the stairs, the grassy lot yard bordered on one side by kind Mr. Birch's backyard and workshop, on the other by a 2-story blank block of brick wall running the length of the yard, ending in a graveyard of scattered, battered washing machines, pinball games, doorless refrigerators, all enclosed by a chain-link fence. The long dirt driveway ending at a large garage smelling of wood so ancient and dry that a deep inhalation might bring splinters to your nose. At the bottom of one side, a crawl space the size of a toaster, the home of Pug the turtle, who comes out in the daytime to wander the yard as I wander it. Next to it, a creaky green swing set tilting near the incinerator, a concrete stack capped with a rusted screen, a door at the bottom with a wire handle and hinges for feeding in the trash to burn. My own world, mine alone with companion Pug. And some days, clouds crossing the blue LA sky so that lying on my back on the grass, I'd see myself, feel and imagine myself jumping and romping among and between huge billows of white wonder worlds. Google Earth shows the garage now gone, the yard paved, parking lot. The fourplex from the outside looks unsurprisingly changed, but for the wrought iron bars forbidding unbidden entry. So many memories. Why write them here? Who would care? Why should I hope from a poem from this? A poem that feels but does not see some seeding and birthing of an essential pain, some primary wiring for a crypt of blue with a fiery scarlet core. Tender embers to the touch, still alive long after all the dead. If I touch, if you touch, if you can, if I can, remember, little boy, remember. Those closed curtains enclosing what Google Earth cannot show. Maybe someday there will be a Google soul, Google psyche, Google heart, Google goggle portals into the tender mysteries of childhood, maybe. Maybe better just to recall all the love of wounded people, their own pain carrying like drafts through those linear chambers of 1318 Hobart Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 1957, coloring the wonder of a 5-year-old or a 70-year-old. Or maybe better just to remember Pug, just the clouds, the playbox sand sifting through little fingers, all of it like time and space lost, safely tucked amid those drifting clouds, or harbored in the dark earth crawl space where Pug dwells under the garage within his hard, beautiful shell. Maybe burning, always burning through the incinerator, the black smoke rising to those clouds, absorbed in air but not in time, carrying the place always, held in love, the little boy curled within a self-embrace, head tucked to chest, heartbeat, breathing, always. Thank you. I really appreciate the applause, but if you happen to be so inclined again, I would rather you wait till the end if you could, just because it's kind of like movements, kind of thing. I really hope Pug is still alive. And 70 years, maybe not, but he sure is in my heart. All right, this is from, I've been to India a few times, and I don't think it's not the only country where this happens, but the women will carry these big jugs on their heads. It's most beautiful and graceful. So this poem came from that. It's called Transport. 3 women walking a dirt road, their bare brown feet below saris in sinuous folds of jade, ochre, magenta. Balance on each head an earthen jug, likely filled with water or milk or oil. Their straight, slim bodies shuffle no dust, necks bearing their weights in fluid strides, as if those brimming vessels were made of air. They chat idly, yet just above their minds, precious goods are conveyed. Hands to work, hearts to God, according to the Shakers. Heaven above, earth below, step by step by step. They walk perfectly aligned, as if this were the way. This is what I read, I think, earlier this year here. Someone liked it, so I thought I'd read it again. Out of metaphors. The day the world ran out of metaphors, I mean literally ran out of metaphors, words fell hard onto sidewalks like nothing. The day all the metaphors died, the light changed strangely and all the poems scattered as if dispatched into a room with no walls. We reached into our pockets and purses for even a stale simile or two to get us through and came up empty-handed. There were advantages. For example, no more hearts were broken. On the other hand, there was no more flipping head over heels in love either. No more could this overlay that. The sun and moon were just the sun and moon. Little stars could not twinkle like diamonds. They were just muted lights against a black sky. There was no more standing under things, almost knowing things to be what they weren't, then somehow were. The day the earth ran out of metaphors, all our emotions became confused, as if every road map had lost its lines and shapes and colors, as if there had ever been such road maps. The barest revelations were almost mundane, revealing themselves only as themselves. The day we ran out of metaphors, we wanted to shop secondhand stores for more, but there were no more secondhands. No more vehicle left to somehow drive the immutable mysteries of being. We were speechless, literally. I'm not a big fan of long prefaces at poetry readings before the poem is delivered, but this needs a little bit of one. I went to a seminary, Catholic seminary for 2 years, 1966 to 68 in Los Angeles. I thought I would check that out. Sister Ignatius said that boy has a vocation. So thought I'd check it out. I don't know how many of you were raised Catholic in those days. It was a pretty conservative church. And there was this concept that we were raised with through the catechism teachings of sin. And sin was generally divided into venial and mortal sin. A venial sin was a more mild infraction that would earn you some time in purgatory. But once it was burned off, you'd get to heaven. But if you died with a mortal sin on your cell, straight down, eternal damnation. And that was for a number of things. Eating meat on Friday. I know it's not supposed to be done, but I'm going to eat this, mortal sin. And anything having to do with sex, essentially, whether it was thought, word, or action. And I think that's enough for you'll get the sense of where this is going. Oh, the seminary in those days, we'd go there on Sunday evenings and we'd go home on Friday evenings for the weekend. So we'd be there through the week and come home on the weekends. Milk Bottle Fridays. The Sunday evening returned for another week at Queen of Angels Seminary. Father Moore grinning in his little lair for the end of weekend check-in. Returning from another weekend home that began with the usual Friday night overheated anguish in my room, lying on my bed, those women with airbrushed breasts pressed between pages poking into my back from under the mattress. Me with my 14-year-old Catholic boy hard-on, aching for release, wrestling in the clutch of mortal sin. Old Mort himself, dark archangel, gripping me hard like I would soon be gripping myself in the friction of images. Those women rising to my hungry eyes, burning me upward to the surge of surrender. And after, the becalmed clock turning on me like an afterglow accusatory ember, pointing me to a new self-carved shaft to hell, a steep slope opening to fires already licking at the balls of my soul in the wake of my body's flaming. Then early next morning up to make the 7 a.m. Mass, careful not to get hit by some bus on the way. Then through the church's double doors, past the baptismal font into the confessional's darkened sin stall, where I'd have to spill it all again, in whispered abjection, through a screen to the profile of a priest dimly silhouetted, either Father Ward, granting disinterested absolution, or Father Anthony, always far too interested, always probing for details in a guttural Lithuanian accent. And then the penance in the pew, 5 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, and a good act of contrition to once more set right the catechismal milk bottle, the soul's symbolic barometer I had yet again tilted into empty degradation. And with confession, that bottle cleaned and restored to a shining trophy for sin and salvation to battle over again the coming Friday. And then communion, the climax of Mass, ingesting in deep intimacy the flesh of the Son of the Father. And Sunday evening, returning to the seminary and the mandatory check-in at the office of rat-faced Father Moore, Dean of Discipline, regarding me with his toothy grin like a menacing Cheshire cat. His eyes through thick lenses staring silently into my soul, all the way to that milk bottle, checking it closely for fingerprints. Oh, those were the days. Still are, apparently. A couple of poems about the mind. Mine gets a little unsettled at times, as I imagine yours does too. It's called Wild One. I've been awake since 4 a.m. Now it's 5:30 and I'm on the porch with tea, the early traffic an unwelcome drone behind the first sweet morning bird songs. I've had Bobby Rydell's 1960 Wild One looping in my mind since I awoke. Oh, wild one, I'm going to tame you down. Oh, wild one, I'll get you yet, you bet, you little doll. All you do is play, you got a new baby every day, and on. Clamor outside, a clamor inside. Where to go? In the dim beginnings of dawn, I'd hoped to go back to sleep. I gazed on Robin, snoozing beside me, her face serene, a half moon eclipsed into her pillow, her shoulder in the faint light so smooth, tan, and soft. My eyes roamed through the window and rested on Mars, bright in the pre-dawn sky. I read a poem on my phone, then fell into a flow of non-sequitur thoughts. This one, and that one, and this one. An image of me long ago gliding on black ice in my VW Fastback, sliding over a cliff edge toward a creek bed, stopping seconds later, flipped against a tree no wider than the trunk of my own body. That memory spurred by the poem I just read, which stirred a cyclorama stream of dully conscious snapshots against the background soundtrack of Wild One. What's it about, I wondered, the quieting of the mind? It's not, I know, the absence of sound or the ceasing of imagery, but rather equipoise, the composure of stillness within the noise. Like Mars, like Robin's shoulder, her sleeping face, her body breathing peacefully beside me. Like this tree on the curb, the one we planted so many years back, long before the coming of telephone lines, now running through its top branches, which seem to receive, hold, even embrace them with a grace I suddenly find stunning in its simple and natural acceptance. I retired about 10 years ago, and for a few years after that, I was a hospice volunteer. Some of you may have had that experience as well. It's a wide variety of experiences, everyone different. You know, enter into this incredible intimacy of someone's life as a stranger at the very end of it. It's pretty interesting. This is called memory care. A key code opens the door to enter the lives of the slowly dying. I walk into a contained randomness of minds, drifting halls, inside beautiful withered bodies, or in wheelchairs planted at tables and windows. Harry's room is spare as a monk's cell. A bed, a chair, an armoire, a window. Walls blank, but for a framed painting of two children on sand, one's arm around the other, looking out at the sea. He is bowed and bony, snoring deep in sleep with saggy, stubbly jowls. His crew-cut hair is sparse and gray, his scalp an array of scabs and welts from walking head-bent into walls and corners. As he sleeps, I kneel beside him and try to breathe into his presence. Someone has put purple felt slippers on his feet. At the toe of one, a splatter of what looks like dried green pea soup. As Harry wakes, he opens umber eyes that are fixed flatly on nowhere. He tilts his head and curls in his chair with an inward opaque stare, tucking knees tight to his chest. He stretches legs to cross or uncross, tuck back to his chest and out again, crossing, uncrossing, tucking, untucking. When I extend my hand, He clamps it in a tight grip and rises into a bent stance. He pulls me toward him and he pushes me away. I adjust my hold this way and that. We move between a wrestle and a dance and lumber into the hall. Into all-around whispers or groans or wrinkled mumbles passing by, or sitting in still silence and cryptic smiles. And he holds my hand tight as we shuffle among this mosaic of broken mirrors, taking our place there. Remember Wile E. Coyote, right? Okay, enough said. Oh, how the mind can be a Wile E. Coyote. A cartoon character always making feverish plans, always self-detonating or plummeting leagues and legions to a tiny nuclear puff, always reassembling from a post-apocalyptic fried crisp cerebral carcass, always returning to the cunningly endless acme of mental machinations, pursuing some feathery, fleet-footed fluff through winding rocky canyons, racing toward the false lure of painted cave faces waiting to flatten the speed of thought. Always the fantasies winging on wind currents, lifting flights of lofty faded scheming over cliff heads, surging upward on empty air to that awful stare into the lens moment of realization that nothing beneath it is real, and it is about to fall yet again into it. All right. Here's my little cryptic poem for the evening. Love Child. From a dream of deep sleep in the night was birthed our secret love child. You wrapped that infant in your love and laid him in my arms. Make of your heart a child's bed, you said, and raise him as your own. And when he grows into the man you're meant to be, you will give him back to me. Do I have time for two more?
You get all kinds.
All right. Well, I'll recite the wasteland after this. All right. Well, here's an Ars Poetica, the reflection on poetry for myself. When the writing shifts into poetry mode, the words begin to hover slightly, not wanting to be bound to the ruled line. Then they want to breathe and begin branching themselves into patterns and rhythms of space that bud and bloom into flower and fruit. Sometimes a spider monkey comes to squat its haunches on a low limb like a fig offering itself to a tree. Sometimes a terrible fish stares below the surface words, daring you into reflection. When a poem calls and you wake to listen, this type of thing starts to happen, which may not seem like much to many, but when it's mostly all you've got, and it's how the rose blooms in your soul, it can be the better part of everything. How it can lead from unsettledness into the natural sweetness of berries. And you want to live in the waking fragrance of their blossoms, always with the urge to pursue in words that chase across the lines, trying to apprehend an essence. Words like ripe berries squeezed into a poem. Okay, now I'll finish with this. Mel Blanc was the guy who did virtually all the voices for the Looney Tune characters. And before that, he was on Jack Benny's radio show and also on his television program. Incredible guy. Well, he's buried in Los Angeles, and his tombstone says, "That's all, folks." How cool is that? Late show. I was tardy at my birth and through my years, so I'll show up late to my waking if I make it at all. Tell virtue and vice thanks for the shadow boxing. It was a great match, round after round, no knockouts. If you see the child of sweetness and light, kiss him once for me in that young boy's tender cheek. Tell him I carried him as far as I could before I lost him to the weights and ways of adulteration. Tell wisdom I tried, or tried to try, or almost tried. Tell Eros I'm beholden for her songs even when the arrows stung or pierced my heart with self-regard. Say nothing to love. Whatever words were needed between us were whispered long ago. Let my tombstone say, out of service, or help no longer needed, or inquire without. or I was waiting for the movie, the one I didn't realize I'd been watching. A divine comedy hoping for a happy ending. No sequel. Ba-dip. That's all, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Wasn't that tremendous? Very good. So we have two lists in the back. One's for the mailing list. If you want to be on the mailing list, sign up on the mailing list. And one is for the open mic. And if you want to read at the open mic, sign up on the open mic. Kelly, I think, brought some cookies back there. There's some brownies back there. So eat the cookies and eat the brownies. Sign up on the open mic list. And we'll come back in about 10 minutes for the open mic.